Welcome to the How to Heart Show, helping men reconnect to the heart and empower others as the leaders they were born to be. I'm Vincent Haasboom. The world needs the raw and authentic men right now. Join us if you're ready to make a change.
Hey, what's up, Lions, and welcome to another How to Heart Show. Addiction. For me personally, I've been addicted for decades with pornography, and it was really hard for me to quit. I recently just quit this year, but it was so difficult. I hold on to the addiction. I felt it was something that I didn't want to lose. It gave me comfort. It gave me really the pleasure that I was looking outside of it, and always felt empty. And I see a lot of people struggling with it as well. So recently I found Jennifer Chase, and I saw an episode that she did with another podcaster, and her story intrigued me so much. It was so powerful that I felt I really wanted to have her on the show because of her journey, and especially her story, because it's really intense. And I feel like a lot of more people need to hear about this, and especially with addiction, because there's a lot of taboo on it. It's like, well, I'm addicted, but it's okay. Or I just drink one time when they drink every single day. So you also need to know when you're addicted or not. And like I said, Jennifer has a really powerful story to share. So I'm really super, super excited to have her on the show and talk more about this. So Jennifer, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. I'm so excited.
Yeah, for me too, especially about the addiction part. And for me, it's also interesting for you because you're biologically a woman and I'm a man. So for me, I have a different addiction than you. And it's really interesting how it started. For me, was the rejection with my mom that started me to go into pornography because I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel wanted at that moment. So as a child, you try to cope, and for you was a whole different story. So I'm really curious how that went for you. But before we're going to go into there, can you share with us what you do and who you are?
I would love to. So, I am a addiction life coach, and what that means for me is that I help the families of the addicts, right? So I help the moms and the dads and the sisters and the grandparents and the people that are really affected by addiction. And as I found my way into recovery myself, I realized how the family system can either make or break a recovery, right? Can really make or break, literally help break the chains of this thing, or it can continue to contribute sort of to the problem. And the addict will then really struggle to stay sober in that kind of environment. It was something that I became very passionate about. As you hear my story, I have lots of different perspectives of addiction myself, but then watching my husband sort of heal himself and the lack of resources that were available to him made it something that I knew that I just had to do.
I was a bit like zone out because it was like a lot of things was happening. So I'm really sorry for that. But thank you so much for sharing. And can you share with us the impact that it had with you on the addiction? Because like I said, for me, it was really the mom side, and that I coped with pornography. And how did it started for you with the addiction?
So I had a very interesting childhood. I am the daughter to an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic, but he was my guy. I loved my dad more than anything. And so his unpredictability really was confusing for me as a child. I thought it was me, right? If I could just be happier or nicer or whatever, my dad would be not so angry sometimes when he came home from work. My mom, I say this to people, if my mom spoke English, I spoke German, right? We didn't communicate well. We weren't each other's people. I I didn't think she really liked me. There was just that relationship was always very complicated from the first memory that I had. And my sister and my brother are both older than me, and they had a really close relationship with one another, but not so much with me. And so there was a common denominator to all of these relationships within my home. And the common denominator was me. So I believe very early on that I just wasn't that lovable. I just, people didn't really like me that much. And additionally, in my family, I have been able to find 4 generations down my mom's side and 4 generations down my dad's side of addicts. So it is my biology, right? Generationally, we have this thing in our family. And unfortunately, I'm a statistic that says 1 out of every 4 girl and 1 out of every 4 boy that's kind of raised in that substance addiction space is sexually abused. And I was being sexually abused by my mom's dad. And so again, there was these common denominators that showed up everywhere in my childhood that just said, like, you're just not that, like, you're just not good, right? You just don't have any worth. You're not lovable. And I understood that. I felt that pain. I remember at the age of 4 was the first time that I isolated myself in my bedroom. I put all my stuffed animals and my record players and everything up against my wall of my door, because it was the first time at the age of 4 that if I could keep the outside world from getting in, I felt safe, or some resemblance of safety. And so that's kind of how the path started for me. The interesting thing about my life is that I had no intent. Like, I believed with everything inside of me that I was going to break the chains of this thing. Like, I looked at the generations before me that were unable to do that as just pure weakness. Like, I had more courage in my pinky finger than they had in their whole body. And so even with that sort of drive of having it look different, unfortunately, it caught up to me.
And how did it cut up for you?
Yeah, so I was 29 years old. It was a Friday afternoon, and I had a headache. It was something that I suffered with my whole childhood and my whole life, so it wasn't something unfamiliar. I went to the hospital, got a shot, came home. Events happened, and I actually got up. And when I stood up, I could feel something wasn't right. And so we went back to the hospital. And that night, I was diagnosed with a hemorrhaging brain tumor and given about 12 hours to live. And when they removed the tumor, they caused pretty massive nerve damage in my head, which then began the overprescribing of opiates. And I tell people this story because I think it's so important for those of your listeners that maybe don't understand what it's like to be in an addict's brain. I was about 2 weeks out from surgery. I was laying in my bed. I was high at the time, but I was taking my medication at the time as prescribed. And I could hear my family in the living room playing a game. And I said out loud, as though there were another 10 or 15 people in that room with me, I said, "Where the hell has this been my whole life?" Like, in that moment, I finally felt okay. I finally felt like I could fit in my skin. I finally felt like my nervous system wasn't in fight or flight like it had been my whole life. Like, I finally felt in that moment I was going to be okay. And that was the last moment that I had choice. I was addicted to opiates from that moment on, even though I wasn't addicted to them physically for quite a few more months after that. But that's kind of what started the journey for me. It's interesting because you spoke about we chose different avenues of addiction, right? And this can be true. People can be shopping addicts. They can be food addicts. They can be, sexual compulsivity addicts. They can be substance addicts. But it actually doesn't matter, because substance is not the problem. Pornography is not the problem. Eating is not the problem. It is the solution to the problem. It is how we find solution to that. And so it isn't until, this thing goes bad and we start having consequences, and the benefits, or the consequences start outweighing the benefits, that we actually decide it's like, okay, I gotta learn what the solution is that doesn't involve substance.
That's interesting that you needed something to cope, and the substance that really gave you the feeling of relief, right? It was really like, For me, I never had that. I was never addicted to drugs. I was one time I smoked weed on my birthday party, and I got so sick I was cured. I said to myself, never, never again. I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah.
I woke up on the toilet and I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
Never again I do drugs. So I was cured that day.
My brain would have said, oh, I'll just try a different drug. That one just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I felt so bad. I felt ashamed, and I said, never again. And I never touch any drugs.
Yeah. But it's interesting, right? Because my guess is, and I don't know, but pornography probably played a similar role for you, which is, there was some relief or some of feeling better, regulating your nervous system to a point where you felt okay, which is ultimately what substance did for me, right? And so I think it's not particularly helpful in my eyes to split hairs about what I'm using to make me feel better. It's that I'm using something to make me feel better, and and in order to sort of be at a place of recovery. And look, people can be sober, people can be abstinent, but their lives are still pretty shitty, right? Their lives are still pretty miserable. They're still very angry, or right. And what I wanted was a life of recovery, which is peace and serenity and worth and all the things that I had really been searching for but couldn't find. And that requires, if I want to live like that requires me to find out and to heal from the real problem and not use substance as a solution anymore.
And how did you come to that conclusion that you said, I had enough with the substance, it's not serving me?
Well, it's interesting. I think this is true in any area of our life, whether we're talking about finances or, again, health, but I don't particularly want to stop eating cookies if I don't see any negative benefits from eating cookies, right? I'm going to just keep eating the cookies because they taste great and nothing bad is happening. And this is the exact same thing with substance. Like, I'm going to keep using substance until the consequences start flipping and outweighing the benefits. And for me, that happened in October 2017, when I found out that I had inadvertently, of course, become my son's drug dealer, and that he, in fact, was also addicted to opiates, my opiates, the ones that I had been prescribed all those years. And that is really what started to flip the scale for me of, like, the benefits are no longer outweighing, the consequences are now outweighing the benefits. It took me, I wish I could say that was the last day that I ever used. It wasn't, but it was the beginning of the end, if you will. When I started to kind of think about, at least consider or contemplate, how do I get out of this? Like, how do I help my son? How do I help myself? Like, at that point, my life was so unrecognizable to who I thought I was going to be. Right? This version of me that was never going to be like the generations before me and my family, that were never going to make the same mistakes as my parents made. I was, all of those things that I said never, never, never to, I had become in the flesh. And I was, my son was a mirror for me for that. When I would look at him, I could just see all my shortcomings. I could just see all of the places that I had fallen short. And so I think without him, I'm not sure what my life would look like today. That's the honest to God truth, because at that stage, I disliked myself so much. I hated myself so much. I had so much shame that I'm not sure how I would have found my way out. But my son graduated from high school on May 27th, 2017. And I checked myself into an inpatient facility on May 28th, 2017.
I'm just blown away by your story. It's just so intense. I just chills when you talk about everything that you went through. And I really want to commend you for being here and telling us your journey, because I think in the beginning it was really hard for you to talk about it, right?
Yeah. Well, for sure. I went to that inpatient facility for 28 days. And when I walked into that facility, my mindset was not recovery, right? My mindset was not peace. It was not, the life that I have today. It was, how do I start using like a gentle lady? How do I get so many drugs out of the house to save my son? How do I still do life with this security blanket, right? This solution that I had found, but just make it better for him. And what I found in that facility when I walked out was I finally realized that the only way I was going to save my son was to save myself. And that was the beginning of really doing the work and forgiving people that had no business being forgiven, living a life of amends for my children. Because yes, my son was walking down this path, but my daughter was equally affected by my addiction. It didn't manifest through substance. It manifested in other ways. And so really, when I walked out of that facility, it was like, how do I become the version of myself that I always hoped that I would be before I started to use substance?
That's interesting, because for me, for you, your son was the wake-up call for you to say, okay, now I need to change. Now I need to do something about my life. I don't want to do this anymore. But I didn't have anybody for me to say, oh, the reflection or the mirror work, like, oh, I need to do something about it. For me, it was really, I didn't have any relationships. I didn't have any sexual relationship with women. So I was always consuming pornography. And that was my coping way of to cope. But every time I wanted to talk with women, I just froze. Or I flee. So I was always my nervous system was always overworking. And I was always in this state like danger. And if I need to flee or freeze. And I wasn't even aware. I was always this feeling. And I thought something is wrong with me, because I believed that I wasn't good enough, that I'm not good a man. And then I created performance anxiety. I felt like I need to be so good in bed that she will stay with me. I had so much fear that she will leave me. So I was trying hard to become this Superman and just try hard to be this person that I'm not. And I was suffering. And then later in my journey, like 20 years later or so, when I said, okay, it's enough, is because I saw it wasn't going anywhere. I saw women and I couldn't talk to them. And there was one time I was walking in the city, and there was a really attractive lady walking next to me, and I couldn't say hi. And from that moment, I said, enough. I cannot do this anymore. I don't know how to do it. I did energy work. I did cold exposure. I did the mind work, everything. I trained myself, and it didn't work. And the realization came for me when I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, I love it. Yes, I love that book.
Yeah, and from there I realized, oh, so it's in the body. It's stored. There's something in the body that tells me I need to run away when I see women because of the trauma with my mom. So I said to myself, now I need to get professional help. So I went to see a psychologist. I talked to him, and we did EMDR, and there I realized, wow, it's so stored, because the one time that he did it on me, I just broke down. I started to cry. And from that moment, I knew I did a lot of work on myself, but it was really inward. So that was really powerful realization for me that, like I said, the body keeps the score, and people don't even realize it.
I think that is so important, because my body kept a score from when the abuse, I think, started happening when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Wow. And my body kept that story for a long time. And so in my family, my grandfather that abused me, he was a twin, and both of them abused children. So you have to make some conclusions that they were probably also abused. And so let's just pretend it started with whoever abused them. That would be 4 generations of sexual abuse in my home, right? My mother's generation was not skipped. So it was my body was keeping a story, or the score, but I didn't know how to articulate it. And if I had articulated it, like in that kind of abuse, it requires secrets, right? And the person that doesn't want to keep the secrets anymore, is oftentimes the black sheep and shunned and shamed and all of the things, because this secret is required for this family to continue to sort of, roll the way that it's always rolled. And so it wasn't a safe place for me to talk about it. And that's why my body kept this story for so long. And even today, you speak about EMDR, which is, I think, partly has saved my life.
Same here.
Working on, these traumas that my brain had blocked out as to help me, right? But as an adult, I was like, okay, I've got to figure out what my body is trying to tell me and heal from it when I don't have the memories to do it. And that was where EMDR really changed my life.
I'm very curious, Jennifer, how was it for you to go into EMDR? Because for me, when I first started, I was just talking myself out of it. Like, no, maybe not today, maybe another week. I'm not feeling so well.
Yeah.
And then my psychologist said, like, no, we're going to do today. No excuses. Like, okay. Because I was so afraid of what I would find. Because a lot of people say when you do it, it's tough. And I didn't realize it when I did it. And I had like 10 or 15 sessions. And the first time that I did it, I was sick. I was sick to the bone. I was in bed. I had flu, fever. And I've told myself, like, what's going on here? My body's having such a big response because I needed to process the trauma. So for me, it was really intense the first couple of times. But later I felt like, okay, I'm doing better. It wasn't so impactful with my later sessions. So I agree with you. For me, it was also, if I didn't get EMDR, I would still feel a lot of triggers that I couldn't handle them because it was always so overwhelming and I couldn't function. Also with women, I would stutter. I couldn't do my own thing.
Yeah.
So for me, it's the same. EMDR was a big help and I wouldn't change it again. I would do it again if I need to. So back to you. How was it for you, Jennifer?
So it's interesting because I used to be, and I still can be if I don't work really hard at it. I am adverse to pain. I don't like pain. I don't like discomfort. That's one of the reasons why I chose substance, right? Like in my childhood up until when I got sober, like if I felt any pain whatsoever, whether it was physical or emotional or anything, I like ran. You talk about, being fight, freeze or fight or freeze. And that was what it felt like constantly for me, right? And so the idea of EMDR felt terrifying. Kind of like I've never done hypnosis for the same reason. Like it's terrifying. Like what is my brain going to uncover and am I prepared to walk through that? I think one of the most important things for me is I found a therapist that I trust with my life, right? I think that that's really, really, really important to find somebody that can help walk you through this, that you trust to keep you from going somewhere that's unsafe. And I think also it's like, what's that therapy? Like when you're afraid of spiders and they put you in a room with spiders, I don't know. I can't remember what that's called, but, anyway, that's a little bit what it felt like as far as my pain and my fear, right? Was it's like, okay, a little bit at a time gave me courage. Oh, I'm not going to die. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be able to do this. And so a little bit out of the time gave me confidence to ultimately spend quite a bit of time really doing EMDR. And I still go back to it in heightened situations or something that I'm having a hard time resolving in my brain. I still can go back to it now, but I don't think I could have done that if I hadn't started slow and found a therapist that I trusted with my life.
I agree. For me, it was the same. I felt really comfortable with him and he makes also a lot of jokes. So I felt at ease and he always told me, how do you feel right now? How do you feel in this moment? Or when I left the session, like, how was it today? And I felt he was paying attention. He was not like, well, there's another check that he can pay just to another day in the office. And for me, I had a really good connection. And my psychologist, he was really special because he also helped me with releasing energy with my ex-girlfriend. She was a leech stone to me. And he clear that. So yeah, it was really, really powerful.
Yeah. And again, for those of you of listeners that are out there going, yeah, I probably should do it, but I'm just afraid, or I just don't know, or I don't want to, I hear this all the time of people, they don't want to go to therapy because they don't want to drag it all up again. And I have quotation marks on my fingers for those of you that can't see me, right? I don't want to drag it all up again. And this goes back to, your body keeps the score. And just because it feels like it's not getting dragged up every day is false, right? It is, in fact, affecting your life daily. It's affecting your relationships. It's affecting your mindset. It's affecting your health. It's affecting all of the things. And by you just ignoring it doesn't make it true that it's not affecting you. So that can go on forever, right? If we do nothing, or we can go to a therapist, start this work, do EMDR, and at least the path is so much shorter to wellness. And I at least will get to a place where I feel at peace and I feel worthy and lovable and all of the things that so many of us are seeking.
Also, Jennifer, it came to me. So the thing that you did with spice, is it NLP?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Is that with the spiders, with the phobia, how to change your mind? Is that NLP? Did you?
No, it was aversion. Is it aversion therapy? Is what I was thinking. I can't remember exactly, but it's basically where you are afraid of something and you just go into what you're afraid of, and it lessens your fears. I can't remember. We're going to be done with the podcast and I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, that's what it was. I think it might be aversion therapy, but.
Okay. I never heard about that, because I know with videos from people that did NLP, and there were people that were afraid of snakes, they put the snake eventually on their shoulders and they were like, oh, a snake. And they were just normal. Yeah. So that's really interesting.
And that's basically what I had to do with fear, because I was so adverse. I was so adverse to pain in general. And especially once I found substance as my solution, I didn't do any pain at all. When anything was hard, I'm out, right? When anything was even good, the only way I knew how to cope with emotion at all was through substance. And so, getting sober, and one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is actually forgiving my grandfather. That took a lot of work, and it took me to not be as fearful of pain and really have a lot more courage to walk through it and heal from it and then move along.
That's really powerful. That was for me also the same. Forgiveness, not just for the other people that hurt me, but also myself. Forgiving myself was also really hard. But I also have been bullied a lot in school. And I left school when I was 16, and then I started working. And I was so scared to go to school because I knew they're going to pick on me. But later on in life, I kept on holding that grudge. And it was consuming me. I was always busy with that. And I wasn't living my life. So I said eventually, hey, I need to forgive them. Even though the worst thing that they did to me, I still had to forgive them. It's not like that I forget or say it's okay what they did, but I gave it a place.
Yeah.
And for me, that was so powerful to do that.
I always say, if my grandfather were alive today, which he's not, if he were, I would not sit at a table and break bread with him. Right. I wouldn't want him in my life by any means. But what I realized, this was like a transformative spiritual moment for me. I had been sober for, I think, about 3 months. I can remember the place I was, the smell of the room. There was something that came over me that realized that my grandfather, who had changed who I was forever when I was 3 or 4 years old, right? I was never going to be that version that I was originally born to be because of what happened to me. But what I had given him the power to do as an adult was to continue to impact me and change who I was, even though he had been dead for decades. And I still gave him that much power over me, the way that I felt, the decisions that I made, the relationships that I had. And so that moment when I had just gotten sober was this realization that it's I'm not breaking bread with the man. And if I'm honest, when I get to heaven, I don't particularly want to see him there. But he no longer holds the control over me that he once had. I actually have some empathy and compassion for him, as I'm pretty certain that he was probably also abused and changed who he was at a very young age too. And so now I come from a place of like, what you did is not okay. But I actually have compassion, and he no longer holds any power over me. And I think that was the greatest gift that I really ever gave myself.
That's really powerful. And for me, it was the same. Once I stopped giving them power, but also I was thinking the same as you, like they've been hurt as well, or they wouldn't have this behavior, or something happened to them. But maybe they've also been bullied a lot, or their parents are bullying them. So they look for a way to blow out steam, or they feel like if I'm going to do it, then nobody will pick on me.
Yeah.
So once you start to think about that, it's like, okay, then it's going to be easier to deal with it. I'm not saying it's going to be, it's take time. It takes a lot of time for you to process and take it on a place and stuff like that. But what I realized once I did that, life became easier. And the
Yeah.
steps that I took towards my life that I wanted became also easier as well.
Well, and I think it's the cliche, hurt people hurt people. And I think there's a lot of validity in that. It doesn't make it okay. And it doesn't make it like, it doesn't give people a free pass to hurt people if they were hurt, right? Like, I didn't abuse children, right? It's not like a foregone conclusion if you abuse children that you're going to be an abuser and you should get a free pass for that. That's not what I'm suggesting. But for me, the only way that I could do, like, this was about me. I just want to be really clear about that, right? The forgiveness that I had was about me. It was about loving myself. It was about taking my life back. It had little to nothing to do with my grandfather in a lot of ways. It was all about, how do I set myself free? How do I finally love myself? How do I finally walk through the shame and let go of this power that he has over me? And, you know, I think it's interesting, you know, so many of us have been affected one way or the other. And if you start being vulnerable and really start looking into people's life experience, so many of us have walked through really, really, really hard things. And not all of us turn that into hurting other people. But I had a lady one time ask me when I was at my my previous job. She said to me, Jennifer, you can have one of two things, but you can't have them both. You have to choose between these two things that I'm going to tell you. And I said, okay. And she said, one, you can have the childhood that you dreamed about, right? No abuse. Your dad wasn't an alcoholic. Your mom and you connected. Your siblings loved you. It was like the dream, everything you wanted it to be. Or you can have the life that you have today, because you can't have the life that you have today unless you walked through every single thing that you walked through as a child. And it stopped me in my seat a little bit, because I was like, well, what do you mean? Right? But then I realized I would do it all over again. And sometimes people hear this and they think I'm absolutely crazy. But I would go through all of it again to have the life that I have today, including the sexual abuse that I experienced growing up. And that's tricky, but it has led to this empathy and compassion and this ability to let the chains go of that thing that have been dragging me along for all of these years, and not make it okay and not say that it should have happened to me, but it did happen to me. And I have the most beautiful life today because I had to walk through some of those really horrific things in my childhood.
That's really powerful that you, from a really traumatic experience, you changed it to a positive, powerful experience.
And it's sad for me because I wasn't the only female in my family that was abused. And I've seen the opposite. I've seen the holding on to it until you're 60 years old and what your life looks like. And it breaks my heart for all victims that have had to go through what we've had to go through and not been able to find healing and peace and all of those things. I think it's possible. It's just really scary. And my prayer is, if anybody out there is listening to this that has gone through, and look, just because I'm a female and your audience is mostly males, there are hundreds of thousands of men that have experienced sexual abuse in their childhood or abuse in general. And I think sometimes it's even more challenging for men to deal with this than it is for us, for females, although it's hard, right? But sometimes I think society makes it even more challenging for men. So if anybody in your audience today is like, it happened to me, but I've just literally never dealt with it. Like, there is peace, there is serenity, there is a way to find joy again. There is a way to find, laughter and happiness. You just have to take the first step, which is having enough courage to walk into some pain.
So what are the steps that people can take when they hear you now talking about this? Say, okay, yeah, but how do I do it? Because I know when people told me you need to get help, and I felt that I need to get help, but I expanded like for 2 years before I got really help. So what can you say to the listeners when they feel like, okay, I want to get help? What are the steps that they can do to actually get help and also stay committed? Because some people go to rehab or to a therapist, but it gets too much, it gets too overwhelming, and they quit, and then they go back into the old habits. So what can you tell them?
So it's interesting in the world of therapy and recovery, we talk about this thing called the stages of change, which is, again, this can be applicable in all of your life domains, right? Whether it's finances or health or addiction or whatever. And the first step is pre-contemplation, which is, I'm not really interested in changing, right? So me and my addiction, that was probably a year, I don't know. I used substance for 14 years, probably year 5, 6, 7, around there. It was like, I wasn't even, like, the benefits were so outweighing the consequences of this thing. I had no interest in getting sober. That's what pre-contemplation is, right? And what you're talking about a little bit is the next step, which is contemplation, which is I go back and forth. So for instance, early on in this journey, I would be contemplative in the evening. I'm not going to use tomorrow. I'm going to use as prescribed, or I'm not going to do this. And then by the time I woke up the next morning, I'm back in pre-contemplation, right? I'm back and running. And so a lot of the times, and you spoke about 2 years, right? That 2 years that you're talking about is you're just kind of going back and forth between, are the consequences outweighing the benefits? Some days the benefits are outweighing the consequences, right? You're just going back and forth. And if I were to talk to anybody that's kind of in that place, first of all, normal. You're not crazy. You're not awful. You're not the worst person. You're not any of those things. That stage is very normal when we're talking, again, about any life domain. We just happen to be talking about addiction. But what I would love for you to be doing in that moment that's going to help you maybe move through contemplation into preparation, which is the next stage. I want you to start journaling. I really do. I want you to start writing about what the benefits are and the consequences. And I want to start getting those things out of our bodies that are keeping a score, that are subconscious, right? That we don't actually understand or feel, but we know they're there. I want you to start getting them out on a piece of paper. I want you to start thinking about, like, how bad do I want? On a scale from 1 to 10, how bad do I want to stop using substance? How bad do I want to quit pornography? Like, how bad do I want that? And then just start keeping notes about how that continues to increase through that stages of change. The other thing, if you're serious about getting help, find your tribe, find your people, right? There's 12-step meetings, there's therapists, there's other recovery programs that aren't involved in 12-step. There's smart recovery. There's all sorts of things. There's outpatient programs. There's inpatient programs. And the most important part that I'm speaking of about those different groups, if you will, are that there are like-minded people that are walking through the same thing that you're walking through and understand your shame. You don't have to articulate what it feels like because they already know it, right? And my experience was, I have this quote wall behind me, and one of the quotes that is most important to me is by Joseph Campbell, which is, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." And when I started to get sober, I realized I desperately wanted to go inside of that cave. But I had tried all of these years to go in by myself, and it was too much. It wasn't until I found my people, my tribe, the people that understood my shame, the people that understood that I wasn't who I was when I was using, right? Those people are the ones that actually went inside my cave with me, that allowed me the courage to sit there and talk about the abuse, or, inside caves, there's stalagmites and spiders and bats and all sorts of things that are not good. However, having people with me while I did that work, my people, my tribe, allowed me the confidence to be able to sit there inside of that cave longer than I otherwise would have been able to do. So when you talk about people that are like, I'm in therapy and it's too much, I can't do it, my prayer is that they will find a community of people that are like-minded, that are walking through similar things that they're walking through. It saved me. I mean, there's lots of things that saved me along the way, but I'm not sure I even start doing this work without my tribe, because it was just too much. The shame was too much, right? And there was something about other people carrying the same amount of shame that I was carrying that we didn't have to talk about it. We just knew who we were and loved each other for those experiences, and that was everything that I needed, and I'm not sure I could have done it without it.
That's really good advice and really powerful for sharing that with us, the steps that people can take. So I really want to thank you for that. The thing that I had with myself was, when I was on and off, was really the fear, because I was believing that if I can do it myself, so I was looking for answers on the internet. I was looking for coaches, energy workers. I tried so many things for me to do it, and I did that for 2 years. And then a coworker, he said to me like, "Hey, you need to get professional help. You really need to do that." I was like, yeah, I will call tomorrow. And I didn't do it. I was focusing on doing it by myself because I didn't want to go into the pain, into the suffering, because I knew if I'm going to go with the psychologist, we go deep, really, really deep. And I didn't want to go there. So I tried to do everything by myself, looking for things outside of myself, until I heard the audiobook, The Body Keeps the Score. And then I knew I really need to have professional help. I cannot do this by myself.
Yeah, I think the other thing that affects you, not only fear, and this might be different for you, but I think for a majority of people that struggle, is shame. Right? If I walk into somewhere, then all of a sudden, at least one person's going to know that I have a problem, right? This is what keeps people from going into AA meetings or NA meetings or whatever the meeting is, right? Because once I go in fact, I have a client right now that's like, well, once I go in and I introduce myself as an alcoholic, like there's no more pretending that I'm not an alcoholic, right? And so the shame is just so suffocating that I just am going to do this by myself, because if I can do this by myself, then I can keep the secret inside of me. My husband and I have a joke. He says to me all the time, we'll be in social situations. And one time he said to me, "Why do you have to tell everybody that you're an addict?" And I laughed and I said, see, being an addict holds zero shame for me. None, zero. And it apparently still holds some shame for you if it bothers you, right? And that's the thing. Like again, this goes back to, being grateful for the things that I experienced in my life to be the person that I am today. Like part of that is being an addict, right? There's no shame for me in that. There's actually a lot of pride. There's actually a lot of I think addicts are pretty cool people. I think we are some of the most articulate, brave, creative, honest, deep feeling human beings that I have ever met. And so there's no shame in that. But what you're talking about, starting this process, is still that sort of suffocating shame of even admitting to one person that I have a problem or that I can't do this by myself. A lot of men struggle with that, right? Which is, I can't do this by myself. And that somehow feels, I don't know, feels, maybe you can describe it better, which is just like you're just not a man.
Yeah, it's also not like being a man, but also being vulnerable. And a lot of men wants to be this stoic masculinity, having a mask on and pretend that everything is okay, which it doesn't.
Yeah.
And we hold on this belief that we're okay when we're just feeling like shit. And I did this all the time when people told me, "Hey, Vincent, how are you?" "I'm good. Oh, yeah, I'm really good." And I walked away crying. I wasn't doing well. I wasn't doing good, but I was pretending to other people that I was doing good. So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And this, I think that this is true when you're talking about pornography or substance, or, you know, the reason why we say okay most of the time is because of shame, because we don't want to admit how bad we feel. We think that like we're not strong people, or we're not lovable. If you knew who I was, if you knew my vulnerabilities, you wouldn't like me. I couldn't show up socially. There's a million reasons why we do that. And the trouble is with any addiction is that most of us start using substance or using something as a way to deal with our shame. So a traumatic event or a relationship or something, we use it for shame, but then the addiction itself compounds the shame, right? So if I started my addiction with a pebble-sized rock, it ended up to be a full-on boulder by the time I was done. And, you know, shame is really the barrier to finding peace and connection and joy and all of the things that hopefully we find in recovery.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing that came to me was when I got more aware of my situation and shame, I got really inspired by Brene Brown. And she said about men are also ashamed.
Yeah.
And that struck me so hard because I didn't know what shame was back then. And still, sometimes it's really like, what is really shame? So can you share with us maybe a little bit more in depth what shame really is?
Yeah, I like to give people this example. So we're talking about guilt and shame, right? A lot of people say guilt when they really mean shame. So I want to tell you what guilt is, and then we'll talk about shame. So guilt is, let's say you are on the streets in New York City and you're getting a cab and somebody jumps in the cab first and you yell at this person and tell them what an a-hole they are, and you hope they get hit by a bus and they have the worst day, right? And you go home and you're like, that wasn't okay. Like, that wasn't nice, right? I'm acting outside of my core beliefs or my core values in that moment, and I feel guilty about it, right? Shame is when you feel that you are unworthy, unlovable, and not enough in your authentic version of your core beliefs and core values. So you have to be, so if you think about the authentic version of you, you have to be somebody else. You have to be this ideal version of yourself in order to be liked, loved, seen, and appreciated. So the example I give this is, if you grew up in your life or in your adulthood, you feel like you are a square peg in a round hole. Your whole family is round and you are square. And in order for you to be liked, loved, and seen, you have to round your edges. The separation between who you are authentically and that round version of yourself creates shame. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah.
So shame really is when I think that I am not lovable in my authentic version of myself. Guilt is when I act outside of that and I feel bad about the way that I acted. So a lot of times you speak about the relationship with your mom, right? That builds shame. Because, and this, I can go back to my relationship with my mom. Like, whose mom isn't your person? Whose mom doesn't protect you? Whose mom, says these, like, that must be a me problem, because that doesn't that doesn't happen. And so as a child, I witnessed with my eyes that my mom had more of a connection with my brother and my sister. And so of course I was the problem. And that's what starts over time creating shame.
But is shame really like an emotion? Is it something that we create, or is it something that we feel like, okay, now I'm not lovable, so there's this shame? There's like you're looking at the ground and you don't feel worthy.
I think it's a little bit of both, if I'm being honest. As an emotion, and ends with the way that I'm looking at the ground and don't think that I'm worthy.
Yeah.
And it compounds, like I said, right? So if I got shame as a child, by the time I was done using for 14 years, I had compounded the shame by my own actions, right? To be so significant and so overwhelming that's why the consequences take a long time to outweigh the benefits of this thing, because substance helped me deal with my shame. It numbed my shame, right? It made it a little less difficult to bear. And so when we're talking about the consequences having to outweigh the benefits, like that takes a lot when we're talking about having to deal with our shame without substance.
Yeah, it's really a way to cope. Really, it's something, it's like you said, you didn't want to face the fears or the pain, so you look for ways to cope. And I did the same. Pornography was for me to cope.
And that's all addiction is, really, in the long run, is a coping skill, right? And it was the only coping skill that I had. So when life was good, I got high. When it was bad, I got high. When I was sad, when I was happy, all the things, right? It was literally the only coping skill that I had in life. And what I've learned in sobriety is that it takes about 10 to 15 different coping skills to outweigh the one coping skill of substance. Like, I have to come up with a lot of new coping skills. And this is what I see time and time again. People will just stop using, right? They'll just remove the only coping skill they have and not add any more, and then wonder why they go back to substance. Because they don't have any other way to deal with life, right? They don't have the security blanket anymore. They don't know what to do when they get sad, or their shame is triggered, or they're like, everything goes back to coping with life with their coping skill. And so it's so important when anybody gets sober that I say to them, like, and I say this to families all the time that I work with, like, if your loved one is sober, but they have not added coping skills, there's a high likelihood that they're going to go back. Mm-hmm. High likelihood, right? And so it's my responsibility in my recovery to constantly be adding new coping skills. We talk about like a checking account for your recovery. And I'm making deposits because there's going to be a day when I got to make some withdrawals, right? When something's happened and I've got to pull some out of that. And if I haven't added enough, if I don't have as many coping skills as I need, when it's the day that I need to pull some out, we're going to be in trouble and we're going to have some insufficient funds.
That's really interesting. When you were talking about this, I went back into my own life, and for me, my coping mechanisms was really the video games, the pornography, because that was for me a way to escape. Mm-hmm. But what I also did was I became a nice guy, super nice guy. I was pleasing people. I didn't want any confusion or conflict or problems. I just did everything what people said, even though people cut me into line. I just didn't say anything. I kept my mouth shut, and I just let people would just walk over me. And I had no boundaries. I didn't say no. It's all coping skills.
Yep. And so that, to me, when I got sober, I had to look at my coping skills, and I had to ask myself, are those coping skills going to get me to the version that I am trying to become? So I was the opposite of you, super conflict driven, right? Like, I have this quality about mine that is not the prettiest, that I can put people in a fetal position in the corner of the room while I'm walking out the door, right? Like, I can, wow. I got it from my father, and I can do it. And that was a coping skill when I was using, that I used to sort of as a deflection, right? As a way to not deal with the pain that was going inside of me. That's how it came out. And so when I got sober, I had to look at all of these different coping skills, just like the ones you just listed, and ask myself, are these the skills that are going to get me to the version of myself that I'm trying to become? And if the answer is no, and I don't give them up, then I'm probably not going to become the version of myself that I'm seeking. And this is, I think this is a really important thing that we're talking about, because this is life work, right? I've been sober for 8.5 years now, and there are still days where those coping skills will, seep into my life, or I will react to a situation where that specific coping skill will come out. And I've got to then again sort of go inside of that cave, if you will, do some work, figure out why I'm going to that coping skill, and then move towards another direction. So this isn't, it's like, oh, I've figured out how to do this and I'm never going to have to go back to that work again. This is life work and work that I will be doing for the rest of my life. And that's true, because shame is my life work. Dealing with my shame is my life work. And so sometimes the old coping skill versions that I use to deal with my shame will kind of come to light, and I have to look at, how do I change that?
That's really powerful. And I really want to thank you for sharing about that. I have two powerful questions that I want to ask because of your journey. So how was it for you I want to go back a little bit to the beginning. How was it for you to really go into the abuse life and really go into empowerment? Because there's also a lot of people, they will never go into the empowerment. They always stay in this victim mentality that, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Nobody will love me. So how was it for you to transition it from being powerful now?
So this happened. I was in the inpatient facility. I had been there for about 3 or 4 days, and we were in a group, and there was a facilitator up at the whiteboard, and she had made what felt like a pretty shitty comment, if you don't mind me saying. She said, addicts just think they're victims. And I got really mad and stood up, and I said, no, I am a you-know-what victim. And a facilitator pulled me in her office, and she said, what's going on? And I said, well, I was abused as a child, but that has nothing to do with like how I'm going to use like a gentle lady, how I'm going to save my son, like that. It doesn't have anything to do with one another. And she said, sweet baby girl, we can't put that genie back in the bottle. And so she offered me an opportunity to kind of say it out loud, because I had really not done that other than for my husband since I was probably 17 or 18. And so I got into a room with about 5 or 6 other men, because if you have a mother that's not your person, there's not a female on this planet that you trust. So I got a group of men together. And one of the men said to me at the time, as I'm walking out the door, he said, Jennifer, you're going to change women's lives. And I remember so distinctly in that moment going, you're crazy. Right? I have a daughter that turned 21 when I was in there who hated me. I had a son that was a raging opiate addict, and I had a marriage that I was pretty sure as soon as I left that facility, I was going to be given divorce papers. So there was no idea that I was going to change anyone's lives. I mean, I didn't even know how I was going to change my own. But what he did in that moment was planted a seed for me. And so I went into the group room that night, and as we were done with the meeting, I was walking back to my room, and I said, can I just say this out loud? I was sexually abused as a child. And as I'm walking away, there was this woman that came up to me, and she was weeping, and she said, Jennifer, I was raped when I was 16, and you're the first person I ever told.
Wow.
And in that moment, I realized that all of us that were there, that were trying to recover from addiction, that our lives were as bad as they could possibly be, right? That landed us in that facility. I realized that we all had stories. Like, I wasn't the only one. We all had things that happened to us where we chose substance as a way to deal with it, as the only coping skill that we had. And when that happened, it completely transformed my life, because it took me from being a victim and the only person that this happened to, right? And the person that had been dealt all of the bad cards in our life and, oh, woe is me, to this mindset of, how do we do this together? How do we heal from this together? How do we like hold each other up when we have, the strength to do so, and have other people hold us up when they have the strength to do so? And that was the moment that I really stopped being a victim and more started feeling more like a warrior.
And it's also with help from other people, because like you said, if you did it alone, you probably wouldn't do it.
I can't do it. I tried, right? I got sober when I was 44. I tried for, let's say, 41 of those years, right? Because I think I started being abused when I was 3 or 4. So 41 of those years to do it by myself. And it led me to substance, or it led me to some destructive pattern in my life every single time. And I think for me, again, this is talking about being grateful for something that I have no business being grateful for. But I think, watching my son struggle with his own substance use gave me sort of the push needed to do some of that really hard work and go inside of that cave, because I'm not sure I would have done it for myself, but I was willing to do it for him at the time. Like, it was almost like he helped until I had enough courage to do it for myself. But I learned there that there is no going inside of my cave by myself. There just isn't. I had tried it. It didn't work. If it had worked, I wouldn't have been there, right? And so life was so desperate for me that I was willing to try whatever somebody suggested for my life to look different.
That's so powerful. It's really cool that you made the transition from being like me, a lone wolf, like, hey, I need a tribe. I need people in my corner to help me and support me. Even though when you have setbacks, there's still people say like, hey, Jennifer, it's okay.
Yeah.
Next time we cannot make it. I will be here. I will support you. And that's what we so needed. And now all this society today is all about me. Only me, 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 me. I only care about myself. And what other people, I don't really care. If it's all about my life. And that's the mistake that most people do is, I can do everything by myself.
Yeah.
And it's not really working, because I did the same and my life was just flat. I wasn't moving forward. But once I let people in, I got people in my corner, I rapidly moved really fast up. So for me, it was like, okay, I really need people to help me and people support me.
And for me, the reason why I isolated and the reason why I did everything by myself was because of shame, right? And so letting people in was literally, when I'm talking about my own recovery, one of the hardest parts of it. Like that was like, we're not going anywhere unless you can do this. But that felt like I was going to die. That literally felt like I was just an exposed nerve walking throughout the world. And did for a while. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like when I first got sober, it literally felt like I'm just doing things that people told me to do. I still make my bed every day because some old guy told me I needed to make my bed every day in sobriety. I don't even really know why, but I'm like, I'm going to do it, right? Because I wanted my life to look so different than it had looked. And I was willing to do anything you told me to do. But that was so scary because it felt so unsafe to me. My nervous system was not regulated at that time, right? It felt like I was walking into a lion's den every single day. And I just had to get to the point where I had enough courage to do that. And I say this, my children, for all things holy, deserved me at that stage of my life and theirs to do something hard. Right? I had spent most of their childhood, when I got sick, when I had my brain tumor, they were 2 and 5. And when I got sober, they were 18 and 21. So the vast majority of their childhood was me not doing anything hard, not choosing them really ever. I chose myself, right? And so when I first got sober and I felt like this exposed nerve, what just kept playing in my mind is that you've got to model. You've got to show them what this looks like. You've got to do hard. And that gave me enough courage to kind of walk into this lion's den, if you will, until my nervous system started to get regulated and it didn't feel so scary and so much like a raw nerve.
Wow, that's really inspiring. It's really, really powerful how you go from this victim and really say, okay, my life sucks. I cannot do much about it. That you really found a way for you to make it work. And it takes a lot of courage, because it's not like, boom, yeah, one day I'm going to change your life. You make a decision, and from there, you're going to take those steps. And like every addiction or addict, we had setbacks. When we go up, it's like, boom, we crash, we go back, or we have a bad day. Oh, just one more time. It doesn't matter. Just one more time. And it always is one more time. And it always goes more and more and more along the years and decades. And then you realize, like, what the hell have I been doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're really inspiring, Jennifer. I'm so happy that I have you on the show. You're so powerful in expressing and sharing this. And I have two questions before we're going to go into your coaching and what you do. The first thing that I want to ask you about addiction, because I think a lot of people don't really know what addiction is, because, for example, with beer, if you drink a beer like once in a week, you're not an addict. But if you drink every day a beer, then you're an addict. But people don't see it as an addiction. So what is really an addiction?
So the definition of addiction and the biology behind addiction is tricky, right? Because it's a multi-pronged situation. So it involves biology potentially, but doesn't have to. It involves behavior, and it involves like internal emotions and specifically traumas a lot of the time. But this is sort of the definition of addiction. And don't go to the internet and tell me, I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but if I am continuing to use substance and I'm having negative consequences in my life, but I do not stop using substance, right? So let's say I'm having a beer a night, but my wife is telling me she's going to divorce me if I have a beer, and I drink the beer anyway, right? That is indicative that there is a problem, that you have an addiction to something. So you can use this with beer, you can use this with pornography, you can use this with whatever it is, right? Like if I'm doing it, even though I'm having negative consequences, then I need to look at what is going on. So for me, you look at it. So I had the biology, I had the trauma, right? Which are two huge, people say to me all the time, so do you think marijuana is a gateway? No, I think biology and trauma are. Specifically, trauma is a gateway to any sort of negative coping skill that we use. And this is the thing. Also, I was super focused when I was a child that I was not going to become an alcoholic, because that's what my family, all of them were alcoholics with the exception of one grandma. Everybody was an alcoholic. So I focused on alcohol, right? And when I went to college and I started drinking a little bit, I would tell myself, okay, alcoholics drink 7 days a week, right? That's what my dad drank every single day that I ever can remember in my whole life. And so I'm just going to drink a lot on like a Friday, Saturday, and maybe a Thursday or a Sunday, but that's not what alcoholics do, because alcoholics drink 7 days a week. And what I've learned is that that's false, right? You can have you can be an addict to binge drinking, right? You can use cocaine in parties and you do it anyway, even though your wife says, if you do that one more time, we're going to get divorced, and you do it anyway. Right? Addiction doesn't have to look like 24/7 use in order for there to be a problem.
Yeah, I agree. It's also with pornography. If you watch once a year, I don't see it as an addiction. But if you cannot stop, you need to watch.
Yeah.
You have this urgency or this desire constantly to grab it when you're not feeling well, then it becomes a problem, like you said.
Well, and I think about this now, like, does your heart race at the thought of it? Does your heart race? Like, I can think of like my heart racing with, almost excitement, if you will, at the idea of using substance. Right? Are you having physiological sort of emotions going on, feelings going on inside of your body? I think that's also very indicative that something is going on. The urge that you can't stop thinking about it, the compulsive nature of it, those are all indicative that there's something going on.
Yeah, I remember when I was at home and my parents left for groceries. Boom! I felt the rush.
Yeah.
Floating, like, oh, I need to watch now. Now they're gone, so now it's my chance. And I felt this huge dopamine hit. It's like, whoa.
Yep. And you speak about the dopamine hit. It's important to know that there's physical things going on in our body, that this just isn't a willpower, mindset, which is I can just willpower my way out of this. There's physical, I can't say that word, things going on inside of our body, including dopamine hits that are, within our brains that are changing when we use something in our addiction. So that's why it's so pronged, right? That's why there's this emotional, this psychological, and this physical sort of pronged approach to addiction, and why sometimes it's hard as a society to get our heads around the fact that it's a disease.
Yeah, and that's we don't want to look at it as a disease, but for me it was like, disease, being an addict to pornography. But it's like, I don't do any harm. It doesn't feel like I'm doing any harm. But once I learned more about the porn addiction, how it trashes your dopamine regulation, I was like, whoa, I'm really damaging myself, even though I'm not even aware, because you get these hits. But what I realized, I was getting numb to actual pleasure in life.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the mood to go out. I wasn't in the mood to meet friends or go to bars or whatever. I will always stay at home because I didn't feel the need or the actual excitement to interact with the world.
Yeah. There's this video. If you have any folks listening today that have a family member that's an addict and they don't understand addiction and the way that it works in our brain, it's a video called Pleasure Unwoven. And it speaks to, a lot of people play this to families when their loved ones are in like an inpatient facility or a treatment facility, because it explains a little bit about what you're talking about and the changes that are happening in our brains, so that people understand that this just isn't a willpower game.
No, I tried so hard, the willpower, and I always crumbled.
Yeah.
Always crumbled.
Yeah.
Always do. I even though I said to myself, now I'm gonna quit. Now I'm gonna quit. Today is the last time, and every time I just cave in, and I knew something was something different, not just the willpower. Some people, they can just boom, they say I stop, and they really stop. But I knew there was something more going on with it, and that's how I discovered it was the trauma with my mom and other things as well. There was. It was getting its own life. The trauma was in my driver's seat every single day, 24 hours. And that's how I realized, okay, I wasn't in control of my life. The trauma was, because I wanted to keep myself safe. And what people don't know is the mind or the brain is designed to keep you safe.
Yep.
So it will avoid pleasure, because if you get hurt or rejected, for me, my biggest fear was rejection, and still can be tricky. But I realized the brain is really powerful, because when we say the monkey mind, it has two voices. Because I can say, I'm afraid, or I can say to myself, I'm powerful, but it's still the same voice.
Yeah.
But to what voice do you listen to?
Well, it's interesting because I share this with people, and I've learned this through the therapy that I continue to do. I actually have four voices inside. Four. I said four, but held up three. I have four voices inside of me. I have the little traumatized little girl, right? I have the critic. I have the protector. And then I have the grown version of myself. And those voices all live within me. And oftentimes when I'm making a decision out of, so for instance, the shame comes from that little traumatized little girl. The coping skill I was talking to you about how I would, put people in a fetal position, that comes from the protector voice inside of me. The critic voice inside of me is the one that tells me that I'm not that lovable, that I'm never going to be enough, that I'm not that smart, whatever that is telling me. And so now, because of all the work I've done, when I'm feeling a certain way, specifically when my shame is being triggered, I can now look at, from a grown woman's perspective, that voice. Okay, which voice is talking to me right now? And are you going to give them sort of that power and control over what's going on in your brain? The important part about that is now I have the coping skills to change the voices, right? To identify them, look at them and say, okay, I appreciate why you're doing this, and there was a place for you, right? The critic or the protector, but I got this, and be able to switch that mindset, whereas before it just controlled everything that I did.
That's interesting. I never heard somebody say he has more voices in their head. For me, that's shocking, because for me it was just one that was keeping me safe, like don't do it, don't talk to her. I think also now I realize I have more, because there were also other voices like, no, you're not good enough, she won't like you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I have 4. I tell people, like, that sounds crazy, but I absolutely do have 4. And the protector and the critic are the ones that really come out if I'm not careful, right? The protecting the entire world from bullies or bad people, or, I kind of get this, just stand behind me, I can do this, you just don't worry about it. Or the critic, which tells me that I'm not that lovable. And so I it's less now because I know it. I've acknowledged it. I can tell pretty quickly now when I switch into sort of those different roles. But it was imperative for me to learn that about myself as I continued to heal.
But did you change it? Did you say, like, okay, your negative talker was getting up, you say, okay, now my psychologist, he said you need to put the brain on the seat, like, you're not in control, I am.
Yep.
Was it the same for you?
Yeah. So a lot of the times I would journal about it, even write letters. So this was early on in my sort of journey, but specifically the critic, right? I would be like, from the grown version, it's like, I appreciate the role that you have played in my life, right? I understand why you were necessary at one point, but I have this now. Like, I need you to sit down, right? I need you to step back. I need you to not take the role that you have been required to have in my life up into this period of time. And so there's different things I do now. I'm a runner. So sometimes, specifically when shame feels heavy, I will go for a long run, or I do a lot of journaling. Meditation can be really important to me. Pausing. So when something happens that triggers one of those people to come, and they come out fast, right? They are like, whew, coming out fast. And so now I'm able to, like, pause long enough to be able to make a conscious decision about whether it's appropriate for them to come forward or not appropriate for them to come forward, right? It sounds like I have multi-personalities. I don't, I promise. But it feels like that sometimes, right? When you're talking about specifically a child that has experienced trauma. All of these things in my life had a role in protecting me. And unfortunately, they also had a role in my addiction and why I chose substance. And so in order for me to have the life that I want, full of peace, joy, surrender, and all of the things that I seek, I've got to really keep everybody in an appropriate place.
That's interesting. That's something also for me to explore. I wasn't even aware of that. And I think awareness is really key for what's going on and what's happening into your life. If you're just on autopilot and you're just like, whatever, then you're not gonna move forward, and you're just stuck in this loop of fear and trauma and addiction and all of that. So yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, Jennifer, and Yeah, I said to you 1 hour, 30 minutes, but I have one more question that I really want to ask you. And then we're going to go into your coaching and then we're going to bring it to a close. But I had a few guests, they also talked about being abused.
Hmm.
And what I wanted to ask you is, how did you, I had this question for a long time. How did you, was it for you in the moment that you feel safe again to make love to people, or that you feel safe to start a relationship with men? Because I know if you're been abused, you shut yourself off. You don't let anybody in. And for me, it took decades for me to let women into my life or start a relationship. And still, the trauma is really strong there. So for me, getting a relationship or on dates, it's always like, it's always this fear of getting rejected or pain. And I was always curious with people with abuse, how did they do that? How did they go from such a traumatic experience to be loved again and give love to people and also have sexual intercourse and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I have been married. My husband and I will be 30 years this year. And we
Congrats.
have walked, thank you. We have walked through some stuff, right? So not only being a victim of sexual abuse, but the addiction and all, and him losing a huge portion of his family in a short period of time. Like, we have been through some things. But this is, to answer your question, I think the most important thing for me was, going into it, I didn't really look at this, but when I started realizing that this was a man that I could potentially spend the rest of my life with, I started, for the first time in all my life with any individual, to start lowering these walls that I had put up and start putting my toe in the pond of, is he safe? Because if you're going to be in a committed relationship, a healthy committed relationship with somebody that's experienced this kind of trauma, sometimes it can be a ride. Right? Sometimes something triggers me, specifically early on in our marriage. Something would trigger me, and I would just recoil from the world. I would lock myself in my bedroom. I would not want to talk to anybody. I called it my funny feeling, which was just this, like, anything could make it happen. Anything where I felt unsafe or off kilter or whatever it was, I just recoiled from the world. And instead of him ever sort of being like, this is stupid, why are you doing this? It was more of, how can I show up for you? How do I make you feel safe? What do I need to do in these situations to let you know that it's okay, I'm safe? And that started providing me an opportunity to trust him in a way that I didn't trust anybody. He was the first person in my whole life that I could show up as that authentic version of myself, right? The square peg that I spoke of. I can show up as my square peg, and he doesn't say it needs to be round. And that was when I kind of started putting, like, and it took a while. And I'm 52 years old now, and there are still times where something will trigger me. But that, I think, is what answers your question, was that I finally felt safe with another human being, like my authentic version. Now, the part of this that was required on my part was that I needed to show him the squareness, right? I needed to have enough courage and enough sort of, again, I'm adverse to pain, but I had to, kind of be the raw nerve, if you will, at a pretty early stage of our relationship, and show him some of that squareness to see if that was something that he was going to, like, hold dear, right? That it was going to be safe. And I think the problem is, for lots of us that have that trauma, we go in and we are round, but we're like, well, you don't love us square. Well, you've never shown up square a day in your life. Mm-hmm. How is somebody supposed to love you square when they don't even know who that is? Right? They've never seen it. They don't know it. And yet we want to be the victim to the fact that nobody loves us in that version of ourselves, because we don't show up that way. And so I think it was combination of me finally having enough courage in this relationship to show up that way, and then him, even though he has no experience in dealing with somebody like this, had just the version of him that was soft and trusting and allowed me those moments of to recoil and for it not to be about him. And he is, even after all the things that we've walked through, and especially a 14-year addiction that I thought was going to break us, he has shown up in a way, we have shown up in a way where perfection is not required out of either one of us, right? We both can be the authentic versions of ourselves, and that is good enough. And we will figure out the rest of it as we, make our way through this relationship. It's tricky because what we want to do as survivors and people with trauma is just say nobody loves us because we are so afraid to show that version of ourselves and be rejected by it. But the truth is, we will never fully be loved until we show that version and somebody accepts us for the authentic person that we are.
I think you've spoken to my soul. It's like, poof, it's really hitting me hard because I never looked at this way, because I felt like every time I wanted to talk or interact with women, I was being somebody that I'm not. I'm not showing my true self. I was pretending. Yeah. And now I'm realizing I'm afraid to show my true self. Like, hey, this is me. I've been damaged like you, but I'm afraid to show it. I'm afraid to be vulnerable, because if I do, maybe she will laugh at me or maybe she'll reject me. But if you're thinking the positive, if she does that, then I know she's not the right person for me. Yeah. But really opening up and really being myself, it's something that, wow, I never really looked at it in that way.
And again, for me, it was always like I wasn't willing to show that version of me, but then I was also felt like a victim that nobody loved me the way that I needed to be loved, right? And I realized one day, it was like, you can't have it both. I'm talking about myself. Like, I can't have it both ways. I can't show up as this inauthentic version of myself, but then say that somebody doesn't love the authentic version of me because they never saw the authentic version of me, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know who that is. They just don't love the inauthentic version of me, which turns out to be great news, because they shouldn't love the inauthentic version of me because it's not who I am, right? And that's the tricky part about this, is it takes such tremendous courage on our end, because we do have shame, because we do have abandonment issues, because we have been rejected, because we have been taught over our years that the authentic version of ourselves is not that lovable. The courage that it takes to show up authentically in these relationships continues in my life to be something really challenging, not only in a romantic relationship, but even in friendships, right? To kind of show up that version of myself. But I can speak, you speak specifically about that relationship with my husband. And I do believe that is why, number one, we have been able to find our way out of so many different challenges in our marriage, right? Like, my husband quite literally is my best friend. And anybody that's in a long-term relationship knows that, like, romance and intimacies ebb and flow in a marriage, right? But something that has stayed consistent through the entire over 30 years that we've been together is sort of that friendship and that respect and that admiration and that trust for one another. And that, I think, has led to, true intimacy. Whereas before, in relationships, intimacy was with that inauthentic version of me, and it wasn't fulfilling.
Okay. Yeah. For me, Jennifer, I really thank you for sharing, but I'm also thinking about myself, because you're hitting on some edges on my side, because when I wanted to start dating, there was always this fear of rejection, and it was so overwhelming. It was so intense, or that she would leave me. So that's why I asked this question. Did you also have in the beginning, when you started dating, or in the moment you say, okay, I want to get a relationship, that you had this feeling or this voice say, yeah, but what if you get rejected? Or what What if she doesn't like you or he doesn't like you? So for me, that question is like, how did you transition that? Like, okay, I'm gonna be open now. I'm gonna do it, instead of listening to that inner voice. Like, what if I'm gonna be abused, or what I'm gonna be rejected or
Yeah.
sexually abused? How
Yeah.
did you transition to that?
So for me, going into dating, I didn't push away from it. I would
Mhm.
I would enter into sort of relationships, and then I would feel it out while I was in the relationship. So also, people that have been through trauma, we're very observant, right? We sit back in the world and we watch, and we decide from our observations what's safe and what isn't. And that's kind of how I entered into relationships, right? I would be okay dating and getting to know people, and then I was just very observant. Like, how did you treat the waiter? Right? How do you treat your mom? And I would start making these observations based on, okay, is this safe or not? And so once I decided, and I would be like, okay, this is worth exploring, or this isn't safe and I'm out, right? But it wasn't necessarily the initial, like, I was okay getting to know people initially. There was something different about my husband. My husband and I knew almost from the absolute moment we met each other that this was going to be a thing. And so I didn't have some of that necessarily, intro sort of experience with him, but that's even like from high school and college. That's kind of how I got into relationships. Pretty untrusting, really, like kind of thinking that this was going to go, like they weren't going to be, like it wasn't going to be good, but I would watch. And there were a couple that ended up like, I dated some people for a couple of years, right? And even though I went in with a distrusting heart, after some of that observation, I realized that, like, okay, this might be safe.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jennifer, because this will also help me, because I always had this feeling when I wanted to go into a relationship or start dating, that there was always this fear of rejection. And it was so tiring, because it's always how you look at rejection. If you go in and just have a conversation and she just walks away, or she looks around and like you don't care, there's always the rejection. And I always made it so personal.
Yeah.
When it's not. And when I try to do that, like, it's not personal, it's not me. If she has a problem with me, it's her problem. But what I always had the problem was with the feeling.
Yeah.
Now it's less, but it was always this trigger, like, oof. You always felt it, like, oof, she's not really interested. What should I do now? And then I'm just stuttering and I don't know what to say. It's like, awkward.
You know what, though? That is the traumatized little boy inside of you, not the grown ass man, right? That's, we're talking about those different versions. And I think what you talk about is important, which is, think about, you meet somebody, like, they're coming with all of their insecurities and shame and traumas, right? And then you have yours, and then it's a miracle, really, right? When two people can find a bond for one another, because we all have these situations. You and I, people that have come from a trauma background, we assume that we're the problem right off the bat. Everybody else is fine, right? Nobody else has any shortcomings. It's me. I'm the problem, right? And it isn't until I started to work on my shame that I was like, no, I'm an okay person. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, not even close. But I had faith that I was going to be somebody's cup of tea, right? And that if I didn't show up authentically, I wasn't even giving that a shot. I was never going to be in a fulfilling relationship if I didn't show up, or it was going to be so unfulfilling, because that person was going to be loving a version of me that didn't fulfill me, right? That I showed up as, but that wasn't fulfilling. And so that's the thing. We've got to realize, like, everyone's broken, and everybody's coming to these relationships and conversations with shortcomings. And I can't take them all on as though it is 100% me.
Yeah, the thing that I want to add is, Jennifer, thank you so much for explaining, because I'm so happy that I asked this question, because this will help me, but also other people that also dealing with the same as I do, or what you did. So I want to thank you, but I'm not totally agree with you, like everybody's broken, because I believe the same. But what I see now is I'm this diamond.
Mm,
At first, it was really beautiful, but now because of trauma, addiction, there's cracks. It
mm,
has flaws. But what I do now is okay. I see the crack. I'm just brushing it off. I'm just making it nice. It's not going to be the diamond as it was in the beginning, but I still the rough edges. I make it smooth. It still looks a bit weird, but it's still the diamond, and that's how I see myself. I'm the prize. If a woman like me, she can like me. If she doesn't like me, she doesn't like me. I know, but usually the body is like, yeah, yeah, no, no, it's not work like that. You can think about it, but I feel something else. So it's more like the conflict that I still have. And you're right, it's still probably the inner child or the shame that I need to work on. And I really want to thank you for bringing that to my awareness and shine light on that, because it's something that also the flaws that you don't overlook. And that's, I think, to go back full circle with having a tribe and having people in your corner that can help you, because they can see those flaws. They can see those things that you don't see or don't want to see, because they will say, hey, Vincent, your behavior is not okay. It's like, huh, what?
mhm.
Oh, okay. So this is something that I need to address on. So I'm really, really excited and really super, super grateful that we had this conversation and going really into depth with everything that you shared. And you
Can I give you
also,
really quickly in closing? Can I give you another perspective if you're open about the diamond?
yeah,
So diamonds start as charcoal, right? And the pressure around the world makes them in the earth makes them a diamond. And when they come out of the earth, they're not that pretty. They're just, I mean, they're pretty in the sense that they're a diamond, but they're not faceted and they're not cut and they're not, right? They're not the diamonds that you see today. And so I think about my life starting as charcoal, and the pressure of my life created this diamond, but it wasn't that pretty until I started to heal. And then the cuts and the cracks created these facets where light shines through it, right? And for me, that is like a perfect, you speak about the diamond, like that's a perfect representative of why I would walk through it all again to have the life that I have today. Because if I hadn't had the pressure of the charcoal that became the diamond, and although it was a diamond, it wasn't that pretty, but all of the things that I've walked through has made that diamond so that it experiences light the way that it does.
perfect. Well said. And thank you so much for sharing that. I totally agree with you. It's really powerful that you mentioned it. And that's how you need to see yourself. You need to see yourself as the prize, not in an ego way, like I'm just this amazing person and everybody's trash. Like, no, you need to put yourself in the first place. Like, I'm the most important person in my life. People can come and join my life. They can go out whenever they want, but I'm me and I need to be me. And no matter what people think of me or say to me, I'm just I'm perfect with my, I always say like the perfect with imperfect
Yeah.
experiences.
Perfectly imperfect.
Exactly. And that's how you need to see yourself. You're not perfect, but also you're imperfect. And that makes you who you are. And that's how I trusted myself. Like, okay, I have my flaws, I have my background, I have the things that I did, but it made me who I am today. And I have the same as you, Jennifer. I wouldn't change it, because if my parents didn't do what they did, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. I wouldn't go into self-development. I wouldn't heal my traumas, because I would be like everybody else,
Yeah.
following the herd, not working on myself, not achieving greater things in my life. I would just be in this mediocrity life.
Yeah.
So see it as, it sounds a bit weird, but see it also as a gift. Like it can really help you grow, but also what happened to you can help other people as well. And that's how we do now. We turn our trauma into power so we can help other people, because we've been there.
Yeah.
We know how it is. So that's really, really powerful. So Jennifer, before we're going to close, I want to talk a little bit about your coaching. So what does your coaching business look like, and how do you help people with it?
Yeah, so my website is www.rise, R-I-S-E, Addiction LC. LC stands for life coaching. So riseaddictionlc.com. And what I'm doing now is, like I spoke to earlier, I'm trying to help the family. So this is what I know about my story and a lot of other people that I've walked alongside in this journey. I can get sober, but if I go back into a family unit where this dance, if you will, does not work for me, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to have to get off this dance floor with my family and completely abandon those relationships, or I'm going to be high and be able to be on that dance floor, right? Because something about that dance floor didn't work, or I wouldn't have chosen substance as a solution to begin with. And so my hope is that, and this comes from when I was about 3 months sober, I was telling my husband about how great I was doing and how happy I was. And he looked at me and said, I'm so happy for you, but what the hell am I supposed to do? I've been doing this for 14 years with you, right? And I was so stunned, because what I realized is being a family member is as isolating, is shame-filled, as challenging, as, as miserable as it is to actually be the addict themselves. And because of my perspective of being a daughter of an alcoholic, a granddaughter of an alcoholic, an addict myself, a mama of a recovering addict, and then seeing my husband's perspective, I just felt so strongly after working in the treatment field for about 6 years that I was being pulled by my higher power to kind of take these different perspectives that I've had and try to help people untangle this thing. So not only the addict finds peace, but that the family finds peace. And then, dare I say, even if your addict doesn't find peace, that you can find peace, right? The mama can find peace even though if your son never gets sober. And I know there's people out there going, Jennifer, you've lost your mind, but I've seen it and I've done it, right? And so that's really my goal now, is to just help the whole system, help my people, my addicts, sort of be able to be reintegrated in families that work for them, but also help the family become not the toxic version of them where somebody is using substance to begin with. So I do that a couple of ways. I do individual coaching sessions, and I can do that all over the country. I could really do it all over the world via Zoom. I also do that in person. I do coaching calls twice a week for people to really build community, because I think that is so, so, so important. Not only as an addict do we need to find our people, but as family members, we've got to find our people, because all of a sudden, like, you can't talk to your next door neighbor about what's going on, right? You don't feel that that's a safe place anymore. And so you've got to find, again, like-minded people that are walking through this. So we do coaching calls. And then twice a year, I do wellness retreats where people from all over the country come to a location and we just heal together. We just enjoy each other. A lot of these people have met over the coaching calls or, different situations. And so they get to see each other in person and experience sort of that wellness and that healing. And would love any of your listeners that think that I might be able to be a resource or help them. There's a contact me. I think that's actually how you found me, was the contact me on my website. And if you go to my website and do that, I will absolutely respond and we can connect.
Yeah, it was actually on the YouTube channel that I found your contact link, and that's how I reach out to you.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, thank you so much. You're doing really powerful, extraordinary work. I'm again super grateful that you took the time to be here, to sit down and have a chat with me. I've learned so much from you, also to look back at my own journey and see where I can move forward, because now it's like, okay, I'm hitting 40, now the holidays are coming, and I spend most of the years alone. And it's not like I need per se women into my life, but it's also something that I miss. It's something that I also enjoy. So I really want to thank you for going into this deep conversation, also to be super vulnerable and share your side of the journey. This will help so many people. So thank you so much for that. I have a final question for you, and that I will always ask my guests as well. So what is your lowest point in your life that you've had? And what was the highest moment of your life that you were really proud of?
The lowest moment was the day that I learned that my son had an opiate addiction and that I was supplying him his drugs. By far the lowest moment in my life. The greatest moment of my life was my husband and I traveled to Europe this summer. I was actually born in London, England, and had never gone back and had given up the dream, right? Originally when we first got married, I didn't think we'd have the money. And then I sunk into addiction. And then there was something about being in front of Parliament in London, England this summer and looking up. I absolutely just got tears in my eyes because it was a representation for me of the work that not only I have done, but my husband and I have done, that our family has done. And it was probably thus far something that I'm the most proud of, is that my family has healed. My husband and I have healed. We have done the work. My son is thriving. My daughter is thriving. We show up for one another, the square versions of ourselves, and allow that squareness. And it doesn't come without conflict, and it doesn't come without hard. But for some reason, that trip to Europe this summer was just a representation of how truly far we have come together.
Beautiful, super beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing. That's really cool that you and your family just transitioned from a really dark place into like a powerful level, like you wouldn't even imagine was possible in the beginning, and now you see it with your own eyes, what's capable, what's possible. So yeah, I really commend you, and from the bottom of my heart, Jennifer, thank you so much. You're really a gift to the world for speaking your truth and helping other people dealing with this, because I've felt always alone going through it. I never had the feeling that I could talk to people about it, or nobody talked about it. Also, when I was the first time when I went to therapy, they never asked me if I have a porn addiction or addiction at all. They just looked at that I had a sociophobia, but they never went deeper. And I went back to that moment and I said to myself, I need to change that. So that's why I'm also building a course for men so they can quit, because I never had that somebody really knew what I'm going through. You do exactly the same, and you will help and still do help a lot of people from it. So yeah, you're doing absolutely amazing work. I'm so happy that I reached out to you and we had this conversation, and I'm looking forward actually to have another part, because I have a lot of questions here that are so powerful to talk about. So if you up for it in the future, I want to have you on again.
Love to.
Awesome. That confirms it. So guys, yeah, we have a part 2 coming in the future.
Yeah.
So Jennifer, before we go, again, thank you so much. And for the listeners that want to reach out to you and connect with you and learn more about what you do, how can they reach out to you and connect?
Yeah, so you can reach out through my website and get a hold of me. I also am on Facebook and Instagram at Rise Addiction Life Coaching, and then on TikTok at Jen Chase. And I think more than anything, I just my prayer is that we can continue to connect with one another and find your people, and find the people that are like-minded and have experienced similar scenarios of you, have similar shame. And I just think that we will all be better off in the long run when we can find our people.
I agree. And the thing that I want to add with this, you're not alone in this. You're
Never.
not the only person that goes through this experience or had this trauma, because I had the same. Because when I talked about my traumas to other people, they had a similar trauma, but it was a different context, or they had a different lifestyle, but still we were speaking like we were brothers.
Yes.
Like, huh? We're exactly the same. So don't think when you have traumas that it's especially to you, because it's not. A lot of people have similar traumas or addictions. And it's so important to talk about, because when I shared, or I did a lot on Facebook sharing and talking to other people, I felt this release, like, oh, finally I can get it off my shoulders and talk about it. And I've seen a lot of documentaries that men are just holding it in, all this frustration, all this anger, and then they just explode, or they harm people, or they go into gangs or stuff like that. So I totally 100% agree with Jennifer. We need tribes, we need each other, and we need to talk. Don't hold it in. We need to express, we need to share.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to add. So Jennifer, again, thank you so much. Is there something that you want to say for a final word?
I just want to really expand on what you just said, which is we are enough, we are good enough, we are lovable enough. And it's time today to start walking outside of the version of you that no longer serves you. And there is a way, there is a light, there are people that can help. And today's the day, right? If it's not today, then when's it going to be? And if the old way worked, then you would be happy. So today is the day to start walking into the version of you that you want to become.
Perfect. That's the perfect close, and I totally agree. You need to do it now. There's no tomorrow, there's no another week, another year, because time goes fast. You don't know how long you have. And if you want to change your life, you need to do it now. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of willpower, a lot of consistency. But I can promise you, once you do it, start working on yourself, your life will transform, and you will say, I wish I'd done this sooner. So do and start the work today, and it will transform your life. So Jennifer, again, thank you so much. It's been a powerful journey, powerful episode. I really enjoyed every second that we discussed. I've learned so much from you, and the listeners will also learn a lot from what you said. And again, take action. I think that's also the message that you want to give today, is take action. Don't sit with the uncomfortable feeling, but really do something about it. Your life is short, your life is meaningful, and do something beautiful with it. So yeah, Jennifer, it's been powerful. It's been really, really cool. And I wish you all the best, and I will see you soon. So guys, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been really cool. It's been really powerful. Again, I've learned so much, and this will give you so much benefit. So yeah, thank you so much. And please do me a favor, like and subscribe on the How to Heart Show. You can you can also follow me on social media. I will also need to connect with Jennifer as well. And yeah, you can follow my journey, the things that I'm doing. Also, I'll be launching my course soon as well. So stay tuned for that. And I wish you all the best. And don't forget, live from the heart, and your life will blossom. And don't forget, listen to your gut feeling, because that's your compass. So listen to yourself, listen to the inner feeling, and you will do where you need to be. So guys, thank you so much. Jennifer, thank you. And I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Hey Lions, thank you for listening. Glad to have you on our journey to the authentic self. Want to learn more to embrace your potential? I invite you to keep listening. Do me a favor and smash the like and subscribe buttons, as this helps the show reach more listeners who need to hear these messages. See you next time.